UK show. I am Shiksha Arora and this is TV47, and with me I have Zara Mohammed, a clinical nutritionist. As we discuss diabetes, as you know, we mentioned earlier on, it is World Diabetes Day. And what exactly is the impact of living with diabetes and how you can prevent it from happening, how you can actually make sure that you control the chances of getting pre-diabetes and diabetes with your lifestyle, with the food that you eat. So we'll be talking about that. Remember, the number to call us on live if you have any questions for Zara is 0795 045 864, or you can also WhatsApp us. The number is 0793 267 279. So right, let's get into the conversation and let's bring in our guest today. Zara, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. It's a pleasure having you. And today we're going to be talking about diabetes and really what role it plays in people's lifestyles. And this year, as I mentioned earlier on, the theme is actually breaking barriers and bridging gaps when it comes to diabetes. And I guess also just demystifying what diabetes really is and what living with diabetes is and the implications on a person's life. So maybe you can start off by telling us what diabetes is and also, you know, what it does to a human being, in the sense how it changes your lifestyle, the food you eat, the food that you are supposed to avoid, and what really you have to do in terms of prevention.
Okay. So diabetes is a chronic condition, so it's characterized by elevated or high glucose levels.
Okay.
So glucose is our body's preferred source of energy, so it's what our cells essentially use, you know, to carry out very many chemical processes.
Okay.
And glucose is formed from the breakdown or from the digestion of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates include both starchy foods like, you know, bread, pasta, rice, as well as sugary foods like, you know, fruits, sweets, as well as desserts.
So like even wheats, for instance, like
Yeah.
when you're having, for example, chapati, when you're having cereal,
Yes.
all of that, rice,
Yes.
as you said.
Yes, yeah. But, you know, so with diabetes, it's, so when there's when it's consistently high over an extended period of time, so that's when you know, diabetes comes in. So it's normal, you know, like for example, when you have rice or chapati, your glucose levels, you know, will definitely rise. So that's normal. But now it's the, you know, consistently high, you know, readings that then end up causing a problem. So, you know, there's also this misconception that, you know, if you have diabetes, you should cut off carbohydrates
Completely,
or you should,
yeah.
you know, cut off sugar. So it's actually not true.
Okay.
You know, really the focus should be on the portion as well as the quality of the carbs that you're having.
All right, now since you have mentioned carbs, maybe let's get into that. How do different types of carbohydrates affect your sugar levels?
Yeah. So we have the refined carbohydrates, so like the white rice, the white pasta, the white bread. So typically these ones have, you know, little to no fiber.
Okay.
And so if someone with diabetes consumes them, typically we'll see a very sharp, you know, increase in the glucose levels. And so this is why we advocate for them to go for more of the whole grains, you know, so the brown rice, the whole wheat bread, you know, the brown or the whole wheat pasta. So this is much more preferable because of the effect of fiber.
Okay.
So fiber will actually slow down the breakdown of that particular food. So it essentially slows down the rate at which the glucose arrives, you know, into the bloodstream.
All right.
Yeah.
And what are some of the best foods that an individual could take to kind of stabilize your blood sugar levels throughout the day? Because you have mentioned that sometimes you will see a spike, right?
Yeah.
So what could you possibly take to bring it down and just give it a nice balance when it comes to
Yeah.
blood sugar levels?
So I think the best place to start would be breakfast. So
Okay.
breakfast is actually very powerful in terms of how it impacts how our blood glucose levels behave throughout the day.
Right.
So typically what we advocate for is a breakfast that is centered around protein primarily, as well as healthy source of fats as well as vegetables.
Okay.
So when it comes to protein, for one, will actually increase satiety. But two, the digestion of protein is much slower compared to carbohydrates. So if you think about it, when you wake up, you've just come out of a fasted state. So anything you eat is digested very quickly. So typically we start our day with, you know, breakfast cereals and tea and bread and all of that. Essentially, you know, a lot of carbs for our breakfast, yeah. And with that, what happens is carbs are normally broken down very quickly. So you will get that high in terms of feeling energized, but like in the next 2 hours, you feel like, you know, your energy is low, you're already feeling a bit hungry, you end up feeling fatigued later in the day. So when you start your day with, you know, primarily protein and fat, this actually makes sure that your glucose levels remain stable throughout the day, but that also that you're able to remain full or satiated until lunchtime.
All right. Yeah. Maybe you can tell us who exactly is at risk of diabetes?
Yeah, so when it comes to the risk factors, it's a mix of genetic as well as you know, lifestyle factors. So we have, you know, either being overweight or obese. You know, if you have a family history, either a parent or a close sibling who has diabetes, physical inactivity can also cause it. If you are pre-diabetic, of course, yeah, so all of these factors would lead to that.
All right. Now let's talk about living with diabetes, right? And how it changes your lifestyle, it changes what you eat, it changes what you're consuming. So, for example, you have a social gathering and, you know, you have a family event and you are prone to get diabetes, you're at high risk, as you said, and also sometimes you do have type 2 diabetes. So maybe you can start off by telling us what type 2 diabetes is, and then secondly, if you are somebody who is living with diabetes, how exactly do you change your foods? What do you eat? What do you not eat? What do you try and avoid to be able to just be healthier?
Yeah. So type 2 diabetes is the most common type of diabetes, and it's caused by insulin resistance. So insulin is a hormone produced by the pancreas, and the function of insulin is to ensure that your glucose levels remain stable, you know, or rather remain, you know, within the required range. And so in type 2 diabetes, when I say insulin resistance, what is happening is the body's cells are actually becoming resistant to the effects of insulin. Because how insulin works is that it actually sort of acts as a key. So it tells your cells to take up the excess glucose flowing in your bloodstream. So with insulin resistance, your cells are no longer responding to insulin, you know, in the normal way or in the way that it is you know, that is required. And so you do get these very high, you know, levels of glucose. Yeah. So. So when it comes to, you ask, you know, the social gatherings, how do you, you know, maneuver? So really the focus should be on balance, you know, so ensuring that you do have a source of protein, a source of fat, you know, vegetables, taking up, you know, a bigger portion of your plate as well. And then, like I said, there is no need to cut off carbohydrates or sugars completely. It really is all about the quality as well as the portion. When it comes to, for example, you know, treats like cakes and all of that, it is unfair to assume that an individual will never, you know, will never consume that. You know, it definitely will happen. So the question is, how does it happen in a way that is safe for the individual?
And sustainable.
Yeah, and sustainable. So, for example, taking a salad before, let's say before you have fries or before you have a piece of cake, taking a salad before that would actually ensure the salad contains fiber. So it would actually ensure that, you know, even after you've had your fries or your cake, you know, the rate at which the glucose is arriving into your bloodstream is at a much slower rate. Or you could even use vinegar, whether it be white vinegar or apple cider vinegar, you know, just a tablespoon in about a glass of water. Drink that like 10 minutes before you have something that is high in sugar or high in starch. Again, very effective in terms of ensuring that, you know, you are enjoying what you love, but in a way that is safe.
Wow, that's a great tip, actually. And how exactly does intermittent fasting work? You know, we've heard this term quite a bit. People have been using it. It's something that has become very popular of late, and people have been talking about intermittent fasting and what it's done for them, especially if you are living with diabetes. So is that something that's advisable? And what exactly is intermittent fasting for our viewers who are watching at home who have no clue what it is?
Yeah. So intermittent fasting is essentially when you have this set time, this period where you're allowed to have all of your meals, and for the remaining hours you're supposed to, you know, fast and only take water. So intermittent fasting can be effective.
Yes.
Particularly, you know, because even with diabetes, when it comes to the treatment and even the management, weight loss is a very big part of that. You know, when we think of an individual going into remission, weight loss plays a very big role, and intermittent fasting can actually help. But, you know, there is, you know, the more extreme examples, but it's not necessary to go that way. You know, even having like an eating window where you have 12 hours to eat and 12 hours to, you know, of fasting, you know, that is doable. So for example, if you say that between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. you're going to have your 3 meals, and between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. you're going to fast, that's something that is very doable for many of us.
Okay.
So you don't have to go to the, you know, extreme end.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Zara, you know, we are approaching the festive season. December is right around the corner. People are going to be making merry. People are going to be indulging in food, drinks, alcohol. So what advice do you have to such people who are at high risk of diabetes? And of course, when it comes to alcohol especially, how does it impact your blood sugar levels? And people who have diabetes, what should they do when it comes to the amount of alcohol that they're consuming?
Yeah, so it's something that, you know, is of, you know, very great concern, you know, particularly alcohol. It does, you know, very much, you know, contribute to weight gain as well as, you know, diabetes. So it is really a matter of, you know, taking responsibility for your health, particularly, you know, within this festive season.
Yes.
You know, like I said, you can still enjoy. There's no need to cut off something completely. But, you know, be responsible about it, be conscious about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just be conscious and I guess know your limits.
Exactly,
right?
know your limits.
And instead of having 3, maybe just have 1.
Yes. Yes.
Right, good. Zara, let's talk about the substitutes that are in the market. I'm talking about the sweeteners, right? So people have been using sweeteners of late instead of sugar. Traditional sugar rather, in their tea, in their coffee, in the desserts as well. And these are things that we have seen, again, gaining popularity over the last few years. So maybe you can talk about the effects of using a sweetener instead of sugar, and if it's advisable as a nutritionist, what would you say would be your recommendation for people who are now using sweeteners more often?
Yeah. So it's actually not necessary to use sweeteners. You know, even if you are diabetic,
right,
you can still use, you know, the normal table sugar.
Okay.
Actually, even with sweeteners, they actually tend to be, for example, if we take like stevia, which is a very common example, it is actually about 300 times sweeter than normal sugar. Yeah, so it's not that sweeteners are a better route to go, and that if you take sweeteners, then your glucose levels will be, you know, more stable, will be controlled. Like, no, the effect is actually relatively the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would you say, is taking sweeteners not advisable at all? Or would you say that maybe, you know, sometimes weigh your options out if you can take table sugar and sometimes take sweetener?
Well, if you want to go the sweetener route, you know, that's completely okay. But as long as you know that it's not doing anything in terms of controlling your glucose levels.
It's like a placebo.
Yeah, it's exactly, yeah. But you can still use table sugar. Yeah.
All right. Now, Zara, let's demystify diabetes. Maybe you can tell us some of the myths that you've heard about diabetes and some of the things that are inaccurate and are not scientifically right when you hear people talk about things like, oh, if I have even a tablespoon of sugar, I'm going to get diabetes, or, you know, I'm going to get extremely overweight, or I'm going to need dialysis at some point because my kidney is going to fail. So it's maybe some of these things that you hear that are very common, especially here in Kenya, you can just tell us from your experience.
Yeah, so one is, you know, what you mentioned, you know, sugar causes diabetes, sugar causes you to gain weight. So sugar actually does not directly cause diabetes. Okay. The overconsumption of it would definitely lead to diabetes, but I can say the same about protein and fats. So even the overconsumption of protein and fat would still cause you to gain weight, can still cause, you know, diabetes. And so, you know, sort of the vilification of sugar and carbohydrates, you know, altogether as the main reason behind many of these chronic diseases is definitely one of the major problems I come across. You know, people going on extreme low-carb diets, or, you know, and typically they tend to be very unsustainable, right?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and when you're trying to, you know, improve your health, you always want to go with something that is sustainable, that you can keep up with long term. So yeah, that's one of them, sugar, definitely.
Okay, so people do assume that sugar causes overweight,
Yeah.
obesity, and of course sugar also causes diabetes.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, if I can mention this, there was a research that was done, when we look at weight loss, because it is a big part of managing, and for a patient to go into remission, it's very important. But there was a research that was done in terms of comparing between low carb diet and a high carb diet, between the two, which one is more effective in terms of helping an individual, to lose weight. And what they've found is that, in fact, a low carb diet is not more effective than a high carb diet when it comes to weight loss. So you can still lose weight, even when following a high carb diet, as long as you are, eating within your calorie requirements, and you are meeting your daily protein needs. Really, that should be the main focus. So whether you choose to go low carb or high carb, it really doesn't matter.
All right, thank you very much for clearing that out, Zara. Now if you are watching at home, remember we are having a conversation about nutrition and of course diabetes. Today is World Diabetes Day. So you can send in your questions. The number to do so on WhatsApp is 0793 267 279. Once again, 0793 267 279. I am talking to a clinical nutritionist in studio. Her name is Zara Mohammed, who is just telling us about diabetes and how food impacts your sugar levels, your blood sugar levels. So you can be in touch with us, ask her any questions if there's something in specific you want to know about how to maintain diabetes, or there is some sort of foods that you're thinking of consuming but you're not sure about. Well, this is your time to get those questions in. You can also call us live in studio on 0795 045 864. Once again, 0795 045 864. Talk to us. This is the Morning Cafe Show, and this is TV 47 as we talk about diabetes on this World Diabetes Day. Now, Zara, there are specific needs that diabetes patients have, right? Maybe you can tell us in terms of things that they need to be doing that is advisable as a nutritionist.
Yeah, so is it particularly in terms of nutrition?
Yes, in terms of nutrition. And also maybe in a nutshell, you can also tell us as a whole, if you are to live with diabetes and of course live a healthy life having diabetes, what are some of the things that you need to be doing and some of the things that are, I guess, not advisable?
Yeah. So definitely when it comes to food, focusing more on whole foods. So when I say whole foods, I'm speaking about plant-based foods.
Okay.
So fruits and vegetables, whole grains, herbs and spices, legumes such as beans and lentils.
Right.
So this should be the greater focus, in terms of, where most of your calories, come from. Like I said, protein is a very big part of that, making sure that you are meeting your daily protein
requirement,
needs.
yes.
Yeah, and it's something that we barely think about, as the Kenyan population particularly. We rarely think about whether we are, meeting our daily protein needs. So that's also, very, very important. Like I mentioned, fiber is also a very big part of that in terms of slowing down digestion, keeping you fuller for longer. And again, also very effective in terms of weight loss. Apart from nutrition, of course, medication. If you are on medication, make sure that you are, taking the prescribed dose at the correct time. That you are constantly going for those consultations or reviews with your doctor or your endocrinologist. Of course, physical activity, very important. You could be eating right, but if you're not moving around, if you're not utilizing the food that you're eating, then it just turns into fat. Okay. So physical activity, whether it be walking, whether it be lifting weights, whether it be, squatting, doesn't have to be anything, taking too much of your energy. Just simple exercises, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day. The key is really consistency. If you're not consistent, you will not see the benefits.
Results. All right. Zara, let's talk about snacks, because sometimes people have habits that they want to just indulge in a quick snack on the go when you're working. We have very busy lifestyles and people have very tight schedules. So in between meals, sometimes you're hungry and you have to go for a meeting, for instance, and you just want a snack. You want a quick fix. So what advisable snacks, healthy snacks rather, in specific, would you say exist in the market for people who are living with diabetes or people who have just high sugar levels? So we're looking at healthy snacks that actually will kind of control your blood sugar levels.
Yeah. So fruits, low sugar fruits like, green apple, avocado, you know, going for yogurt, plain yogurt, fruits like berries, you know, nuts and seeds, you know, very good sources of omega-3, healthy sources of fat. So those are, you know, just some examples of, you know, snacks someone can use.
All right, okay. And Zara, there is a very hot topic that obviously the past 2-3 years we've been talking about. It's called Ozempic. Every single person, especially in the West, seems to be consuming Ozempic, and not for the right reasons, because maybe you can tell us what exactly Ozempic is. I know a side effect of Ozempic is weight loss.
Yes.
And people are using it to suppress their diets, to suppress their appetites rather, so that they eat less. And then of course at the end of the day, a side effect is weight loss. But this is actually a medicine that has been catered specifically for people who are living with diabetes.
Yes.
And there seems to be a shortage in the world. You know, everywhere you go, Ozempic seems to be run out, and you go to a pharmacy, they're like, no, we're out of Ozempic, we don't have Ozempic in stock. And that's because people are using for the wrong reasons, and that's to lose weight. It's a quick fix, it's a shortcut to losing weight. So what exactly is Ozempic for someone who has no idea, and why is it that Ozempic has become such a rage in the world?
So like you said, Ozempic is a drug it's an injectable drug that was you know, designed for individuals with type 2 diabetes who had, you know, struggled losing weight. And because it's been so effective in terms of weight loss, that's why we see the surge. And, you know, as you know, with diet culture, just how much weight loss is such a, you know, achieving the perfect body, the thickness,
body standards.
How, you know, there's so much pressure, be it on men or women, you know, to have that perfect body. And so that just explains why, you know, there's been such a surge in terms of, you know, individuals even who don't have diabetes, you know, going for it. In terms of the effect, so like I said, it's for type 2 diabetes individuals. So if you don't have type 2 diabetes, then there are those adverse effects that come with it. There are those reactions that come with it. Also, it is, you know, a drug that is quite expensive. Like you said,
absolutely,
it's a quick fix. So it's something that is not sustainable. And typically what we are seeing currently is individuals, after using this drug, once they come off the drug, then there is that, you know, the weight sort of comes back, the old habits come back. So, you know, that just shows how much it should not be used for weight loss if you don't have type 2 diabetes.
Right, and this seems to be quite a phenomenon, especially in the West, where all these celebrities are using Ozempic. And because of that, it seems to be gaining popularity, and every single person wants to know more about it. There's this increased curiosity when you talk about Ozempic. So are there other drugs like this that, you know, people with diabetes specifically should be using, type 2 diabetes, or is it just currently Ozempic is the most common one and it's the only one?
No, there's so many other, you know, types of drugs. You know, there's insulin, there's glucophage, there's so many other, you know, the oral drugs as well as the injectables. So there's so many other drugs that we have been using before Ozempic came up,
All right.
And we're still using them.
All right. You've been mentioning that protein is very important for you, right? And of course, even fiber as well. So what are the right amounts of protein that a person needs to be consuming on a day-to-day to maintain a healthy lifestyle and, of course, a healthy diet?
Yeah, so it really depends on an individual. We normally use, for example, for adults, an adult should be taking 1.6 grams of protein per kg per day.
Okay.
So let's say if your weight is 60, so multiply 60 by 1.6, that gives you the amount of grams you need to be taking per day. And it can go higher, you know, depending on your requirements. Maybe if you have a disease that is increasing your protein needs, you know, depending on your goals as well. If you're trying to build more muscle, maybe look a bit more toned. But typically, you know, between 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kg per day.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. Zara, let's talk about diabetes, especially for pregnant women. How exactly are pregnant women supposed to control diabetes, and what are the effects of living with diabetes as a pregnant woman? And, you know, as you know, when you're pregnant, you have cravings.
Yeah,
so how exactly are you supposed to maintain a healthy diet when you are pregnant, living with diabetes?
Yeah. So yeah, it is definitely a challenge being pregnant, and having a disease that is sort of limiting your options. But it is very necessary, you know, for the health of the mother as well as the baby. So the same strategies we've talked about, you know, they apply the same way to a pregnant woman. Of course, in terms of the calorie or the energy requirements for a mother, that would be higher because of the growing child. And typically what we see with we call it gestational diabetes, is that, you know, once the mother has delivered the baby, typically we see you know, the glucose levels coming back to normal in most cases. But there are those instances where, you know, an individual will, you know, seemingly have to live with diabetes for much longer.
Is diabetes hereditary? Can it be passed down through generations? You know, could you have like a grandma, for instance, or one of your parents has diabetes, and then you also develop diabetes from a very early stage? Or is it just something that happens because of lifestyle factors?
Yeah, so genes do, you know, definitely play a part. So family history, a parent, a close sibling, particularly, you know, very close family members, you know, having
immediate family,
immediate family members. But you know, the environment is what signals the gene. So you could have family members who have diabetes, but if you are living in a way and eating in a way that is keeping it at bay, you know, you're conscious about your choices, you're exercising and all of that, then you definitely do significantly reduce your risk of developing diabetes. But if you are, you know, indulging, you know, you're not really conscious of your health choices, then that, you know, will definitely predispose you to diabetes.
Okay, thank you very much, Zara. As we continue having this conversation, I'd like to remind you, if you're watching at home, you can also talk to us about diabetes. If you have any questions regarding diabetes, as today's World Diabetes Day, please send them in. The WhatsApp number is 0793-267-279, or you can call us live on 0795-045-864. In studio with me right here, I have Zara Mohammed, who is a clinical nutritionist, and she is just basically demystifying diabetes. So if you have any questions regarding diabetes, please don't feel shy. Send them in and she'll be right here and available to answer all your questions. For now, let's take that short break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m.
Welcome back. You're watching TV 47 and this is the Morning Cafe Show. I am Shiksha Arora. Right before the break, we were talking about diabetes and we will still continue to have that conversation with me in studio. I have Zara Mohammed, who is a clinical nutritionist. And as I told you earlier on, this is your chance to ask all those questions regarding diabetes. Today is actually World Diabetes Day. So if you want to talk about diabetes, if you have any questions, any concerns, anything that you need to get some sort of clarity on, this is your chance. 0793 267 279, that's the WhatsApp number, or you could also call us on 0795 045 864 to get your questions in. Or if you have any comments regarding diabetes, now is the time to just air them right here on the show. Right, so Zara, you know, when it comes to diabetes, how exactly does an individual know that they have diabetes? Are there certain factors, are there certain symptoms that could actually show that you have diabetes? Because sometimes you could be living with diabetes and you have absolutely no clue.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the, telltale symptoms is frequent thirst, frequent urination, as well as frequent hunger. So these three are, typically what tell us or indicate that we should probably check this individual's glucose levels. But weight loss is also, very typical.
Common.
Yeah, even in diabetes. And what's very interesting is that even those of us who don't have diabetes, we should be concerned about our glucose levels because we were talking about the spikes, right? So when your glucose levels rise sharply and then fall very quickly. So it actually tends to happen even in those of us who don't have diabetes. And glucose spikes will manifest in different ways. For example, an individual can complain of chronic fatigue. So, constantly being fatigued or cravings throughout the day or being hungry constantly or even, glucose spikes can even come in the form of skin issues like acne or eczema or even hormonal issues as well, or even brain fog, depression, anxiety, and then long term you see it manifesting as diabetes.
Okay.
So essentially with these chronic diseases, it's something that takes years and years before you finally get the final diagnosis of diabetes. But if you are keen, then you'll realize that, these are things that were actually showing up much, much earlier. It's just that I didn't have, maybe the education or the knowledge to know that, maybe I could have done something differently.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And when we talk about blood tests and how important it is to frequently get checked and to be able to just know your health and how healthy you are, in the sense if you have diabetes, if you have blood pressure, you have thyroid, because these are things that manifest, with age as well. So how important is it to get a checkup done and how frequently should one do it?
Yeah. This is why the annual checkups or the biannual checkups are really important.
Yes.
Because otherwise you really will never know whether something is
Wrong.
is wrong. Typically with diabetes, the tests that we do at the hospital are like the random blood sugar, where we check, your glucose levels after you've eaten. There's the fasting blood sugar, so we check glucose levels when you're in a fasted state. There's also what we call the HbA1c. So this is a test that gives us a picture of how your glucose levels have been behaving in the past 3 months. And then there's also the fasting insulin, which is actually much more accurate in terms of telling us, particularly in terms of insulin resistance, how far along an individual is. Yeah.
All right. Now, Zara, I want to discuss something that I think is sometimes people are always on the fence about when it comes to the kind of sugar and the kind of sweets that you should be taking. My father personally, I'm going to be saying this to you because we always have a fight with him at home. He doesn't listen when it comes to not taking sugary things, desserts, cakes. There's some people who have sweet tooth.
Yeah.
Is it sweet teeth or sweet tooth? Anyway, they have a sweet tooth and they're constantly talking about how much they need sugar, right? And how important it is for them to actually consume sugar. So what exactly is the level of sugar that somebody should be taking in a day? Is there certain levels? Is there an amount that is actually specified that you need to be taking this much, maybe twice a day, or you need to be taking maybe one dessert? Or what exactly is the right amount of sugar to be consuming in a day? And I'm not just talking about fruits. I'm talking about like desserts, cakes, things that are unhealthy. Like, is it advisable to completely just be like, no, you know, I'm not going to do it. You said it's not sustainable because people do have cravings. But like, what would you like to tell someone who has a sweet tooth and really cannot help themselves in indulging when it comes to sugary things and sugary foods?
So in terms of, you know, the exact amount of sugar you should have, that would depend, you know, person to person.
Okay.
Because each of us have, you know, different calorie requirements depending on our activity levels, and, you know, if we have any chronic disease and such, that would, you know, there isn't really an exact, you know, quantity for every individual. So that would really depend. It would vary person to person.
Right.
But for individuals who suffer from, you know, the sugar cravings, having the sweet tooth, so typically that just shows that even in terms of like the meals, that just indicates that the meals are not as balanced as they should be. Yeah, because like I told you, particularly with protein, once you meet your protein needs, you actually find that even the sugar cravings dissipate on their own. They actually go away on their own. So, you know, that's why I was talking about the savory breakfast, or the protein being the centerpiece of your breakfast particularly. Because with time, the cravings go away on their own. The fatigue dissipates on its own. So yeah, if you're having the sugary tooth and everything, it just shows that, you know, something in your meals and the way you've been eating is not right, and you really need to look at that.
Yeah, interesting. I did not know that. I'm going to take note and tell my dad because he always has this sweet tooth and he's constantly looking for sugary things, sugary foods to eat. But yes, it makes sense. I guess if you have the right amount of protein intake, then your cravings are obviously not as high.
Exactly.
All right.
Because when
Yes,
because when you're having the cravings, what is happening is you're experiencing the glucose spikes constantly. So, you know, the rush that comes with it, and then it crashes, and so you need to energize again. So when you have the protein right, and, you know, you're meeting your calorie needs, then your glucose levels remain steady. When your glucose levels are steady, then, you know, you don't need sugar, you know, because you're okay.
Okay, amazing. Zara, what is a typical diet of somebody who has diabetes? Maybe you can come up with breakfast, lunch, dinner, and that could be something that is healthy, it's sustainable, you can actually maintain your diet, and it's not foods that are very expensive, foods that are simple but easily available.
Yeah. So, you know, for example, for breakfast, having, let's say, eggs with beans, a slice of bread, and a cup of tea. If you can have vegetables for breakfast, you know, that would also work. You know, for lunch, you could do ugali with beef and vegetables, you know, just our staple foods. It's essentially just playing around with portions. Like I said, the quality of the carbs is really important in this case. So if you can, you know, get the whole grains, that would be much, much better for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Zara, for that. So we have some questions that have come in on WhatsApp. Remember, you can reach out to Zara. The number is 0793 267 279. Find us on WhatsApp. You can also call us live on 0795 045 864. If you have any questions for Zara Mohammed, who is a clinical nutritionist regarding diabetes, send them in. So this one says, good morning, my name is Collins. I once heard that diabetes is a food disease and that it should be ideally managed using food. My question is, how can a diabetic manage his condition using foods only and slowly come off medication?
Yeah, so that is true. In fact, in some cases, a doctor will actually opt to send an individual to a nutritionist first before he prescribes any medication. And then in case there aren't any improvements, then, you know, that's when meds are introduced. Yeah, so food definitely does play a huge role. It is, you know, very much one of the top risk factors of diabetes. And so, like I said, going for foods that are whole or plant-based foods, like, you know, whole grains like brown rice, whole wheat, you know, whole pasta, you know, millet, going for fruits and vegetables, for nuts and seeds, for herbs and spices. Typically, this is what we advocate for.
All right. And I've got actually another question that has come in that says, greetings, what are the fruits that are recommended? Thorn melon and pepinos, waweru of Vision X cereals, kayole, and also please let me get the expert's number. Maybe you can just add your email, or if there is social media that they can reach out to you, or how exactly they can find you. But also in terms of fruits, what are the fruits that are recommended that are actually advisable, you know, when it comes to controlling diabetes, and what fruits are healthy?
Yeah. So there are the low sugar fruits like the green apple, avocado, pawpaw, but even people who have diabetes can still have the high sugar fruits like the oranges and the banana. But then the portion is what changes. So if it's, for example, an orange, half of it would be better. Instead of taking, if it's a large banana, taking half of it, that would be much better for glucose control.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So remember, you can also get your questions in. Zara is answering some of your questions. The number is 0793-267-279. That's the WhatsApp number. Send us a message. Tell us what it is that you want to know exactly about diabetes and, of course, managing diabetes. If you have diabetes, you're living with diabetes, someone you know in the family who also has diabetes, and there is some clarity that you need, Zara is going to be giving that right here in studio. We also have the number that you can call in on, 0795-045-864, as this year is, we're actually discussing World Diabetes Day, and the theme this year is breaking barriers and bridging gaps. So Zara, when it comes to diabetes and this year's theme, which is breaking barriers and bridging gaps, what exactly does this theme intend on doing, and how does food do that? How do you break barriers and bridge gaps using nutrition when it comes to managing and controlling diabetes?
Yeah. So this year's theme is actually very meaningful.
Yes.
Because it actually is focusing on or highlighting the need to actually dismantle, some of the obstacles to effective diabetes management. And some of these obstacles can be, the lack of access to healthcare, the social stigma that comes with diabetes, the misconceptions about diabetes as well. But then it's also about sort of, building communities, bringing people together, across communities, families, as well as health systems in order to support individuals, with diabetes. So, with nutrition, like we've talked about, there's so many myths and misconceptions around it. There's also the social stigma, the sort of, seeing individuals with diabetes as, people who made poor, health choices, don't have self-control. There's sort of that shaming of, you didn't make the right choice, try harder.
Which is why you got diabetes.
Yeah, which is why you got diabetes, which is why you're overweight, really all of these things that come with diet culture.
Okay.
And so the role of nutrition, apart from, talking about what you should be eating, is really also about sort of, dismantling these, these social stigmas, and really letting people know that it is not your fault, that, okay, yes, you might have made a few missteps here and there, but it's nothing to be ashamed of.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Zara. A question, another one that says, morning, I tend to eat 3 hours a day, strictly. If I don't, I feel tired or fatigued. Is it a sign of diabetes? That's Sam from Nairobi. I don't understand if they mean every 3 hours or 3 hours at length. I'm a bit confused, but maybe you can give answers for both scenarios.
Yeah. Well, it might not necessarily mean that you have diabetes, but it could be that you're experiencing what we talked of, the glucose spikes.
Yes.
So what is more advisable is to, get your glucose levels checked, and also to really look at what you're eating. If you're having foods that are primarily very high in carbs, starches, sugary foods, then that would explain why you're constantly hungry. And so, like I said, the balance, of making sure you're having protein, fats, and vegetables as well. This is why it comes in.
All right.
Yeah.
And Zara, what are some of the most important things to note when it comes to management of diabetes through diet, right? Are there some do's? Are there some don'ts? You have mentioned quite a few, but is there something specifically that somebody or an individual can do to be able to manage diabetes better?
Well, I would say, I think I've mentioned
most of them.
Yeah, I've mentioned most of them. But I would say, there's also, like we talked about, the social stigma. So there's also sort of the anxiety that is attached to, when it comes to mealtime because of all the shaming and everything. And so it is important for individuals with diabetes to know that really there is no need to to be anxious, during meal times, really. It's all about making conscious decisions, like we said, the the steps or the examples that I've given, you know, are very practical, very doable. Always go for something that is sustainable, that you can commit to long term. For some people, you know, starting small is what works better. You know, so even the smallest step, you know, go with that, be consistent with it, and then build on it over time.
All right, thank you, Zara. We actually have a caller in, and that's Benjamin from Makindu. Benjamin, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm fine.
Yes, do ask.
Yeah.
What's your question?
There is a lot of conflicting reports concerning diabetes, diet.
Okay.
Sometimes there are some clinicians who are saying that if you consume keto diet, which is low in carbohydrates, you are likely not to use drugs.
Okay.
So I want a clarification from the clinician.
Yes.
They say, some of the sites, they say that if you can consume zero carbohydrates, you consume proteins and vegetables,
Yeah.
you are likely to avoid taking drugs, and you are likely to maintain the sugar level. So the clinician she's saying that you consume some carb like whole grain and sorts of things.
Right.
So I want the clarification that this one may spike the glucose level, unlike when you are taking keto diet. So I want that kind of clarification.
Okay. Yes, Zara.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the keto diet, you know, definitely is something that a lot of people with diabetes, once they get the diagnosis, is something that they, you know,
Immediately jump to.
Immediately will jump to.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's not necessary. If it works for you, if you can afford it, because it is quite expensive to keep up with, you know, leave alone the cravings that you'll have for bread and rice, but just the expensive.
I actually went on a keto diet for 2 months straight.
Yeah.
And I will not lie to you, it is one of the hardest things that you can do. It is one of the most unsustainable diets. I have now reintroduced carbs into my system, but going on a crash diet, it is not advisable at all, because the amount of cravings you get in the first 5 days, it is extremely excruciatingly painful to be able to deal with those cravings, because that's all you think about. All you think about is food and carbs.
And it ruins your mood.
Your energy levels are very low.
Energy levels are very low. Yeah, but there are people who follow it, and you know,
they seem to be managing.
Exactly, they're losing weight. Their diabetes, you know, they went into remission. You know, they're perfectly okay. They can keep up with it. So if you can do that, if it's working for you, if you're feeling better, you're losing weight, you feel like you're more in control of your health, then definitely, you know, keep up with it.
Okay.
But otherwise, like I said, it is not necessary. And at the end of the day, you do need carbs, whether or not you have diabetes, right? Like I said, glucose is your body's preferred source of energy, right? So you definitely do need the carbohydrates.
Right, thank you very much for that clarification. Zara, we have a message that says, hey, I'm Terence. How can you know someone has diabetes? You've already mentioned, maybe I think to repeat for those who missed out, how do you know and how can you tell that you have diabetes?
Yeah. So there are those symptoms that we mentioned, the frequent urination, frequent thirst, frequent hunger, you know, weight loss. But then again, the only definite way to know would be by taking the individual to a hospital, or by, you know, you doing your annual or biannual checkups. So blood test would be, you know, the definite way to know that you do have diabetes or not.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I hope that makes it clear. We've got another message on WhatsApp from Monica, and she says, hey, please discuss healthy use of supplements for diabetics and which ones to consider. That's Monica from Nairobi.
Okay. So with supplements, it really depends. You know, if your oral intake is okay, if you have a good appetite, you're consuming food as required, then there really is no need.
Okay.
However, if maybe you have done a blood test, or maybe if an individual's appetite is significantly low, then that is where, you know, supplements would come in. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much for that. Another one that says, what are some of the most common challenges that you face when managing diabetics that lead to poor prognosis? Zara.
So definitely uncontrolled diabetes. So, individuals who are not keen on what they're eating, they're not keen on the level of physical activity, they're not keen on, their routine consultations or checkups, as well as, the use of medication. So this is where we typically see the incidence of, for example, chronic kidney disease. So an individual having to go for, dialysis because of the damage to their kidneys.
Yes.
Or the loss of vision, the damage to the nerves. So when an individual is not keen, when glucose is uncontrolled, that is where poor prognosis comes in.
Okay, thank you very much, Zara. We'll take a short technical break, but we'll be back in just a moment. Keep those questions coming in. We are having a very engaging conversation with Zara Mohammed, who is a clinical nutritionist, and she is answering all your questions regarding diabetes. Today is World Diabetes Day, so you can get those questions in on 0793 267 279, or you can